Welcome to the Equine Vet Connect podcast. I'm your host, Dan Carter. I'm a veterinarian and a farrier. The goal of this podcast is to educate horse people, break things down, bust myths, and keep it real. Speaking of breaking things down, here's my legal disclaimer to keep my attorney and insurance company happy. While I am a vet, I may not be your vet. Contact them before trying anything you hear on this podcast. Remember, just because you watched it on YouTube or heard it on a podcast does not mean you can do it. Please use common sense. All right, welcome back to the Equine Vet Connect podcast. I'm your host, Dan Carter. We're here in the studio, also known as Treatment Room 1. I have with me today Dagney Crowley with Centaur Strategies. Dagney, how are you doing today?
I'm doing all right today, Dan. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic.
Good.
Now, Dagney, this is going to be a great episode, I think, because this is something that I think it's everywhere. Every barn I go into has got some sort of PEMF type machine. You see them a lot of shows, you see them in barns. But, I get questions about this all the time, and I'll be real honest, I have trouble answering them, so I'm really looking forward to this. So let's start out, like, we hear PEMF, we hear different ones, like there's different brands out there, but let's boil this down, and let's get it really simplified, and let's get it where it makes sense. So let's start off with, what is PEMF?
So PEMF stands for pulsed electromagnetic fields, and it's a adjunct therapy that's used alongside your traditional veterinary medicine, never as a replacement to your traditional veterinary medicine. Let's all remember that. But essentially what's happening is when electric fields go like this with magnetic fields, that is what forms the electromagnetic field, magnetic spectrum. So what the electromagnetic spectrum is we have our little grade school 8th grade physics drawing, and I'll link this for the post. But all forms of light, all forms of microwaves, radio waves, UV rays, gamma rays are on the electromagnetic spectrum, and the only thing that changes with them is their frequencies. All
right, so hold on, back up. So electromagnetics, I'm gonna make sure I got this. You have electricity.
Yep.
It's gonna strike a magnetic field.
Correct.
And then we produce an electromagnetic spectrum.
Right.
Where else do we see this in our world?
So you see this in everything. So that interaction between electric field and magnetic fields is what makes radio waves, microwaves, visible light is just the visible version when it's at the frequency that makes it visible. And then going forward from that into ionizing radiation like UV light, the bad things, UV and gamma radiation that we think of as being like cancer causers.
So when I'm listening to the radio, I have some form of electromagnetic spectrum. Okay.
And it's just a higher frequency. That's why you'll often in the literature see PEMF therapy referred to as extremely low frequency. So at 0 hertz, electromagnetic fields, this is like stagnant magnets. So this is like the little fetlock magnet rings that they sell for like wind puffs that just put off between 0 and 20 hertz.
Like my refrigerator magnet.
Exactly. So that's stagnant magnet. But then once you pass around 20 hertz and you get up into the 20 to 90 to 100 range, that's when they become pulsed electromagnetic fields.
Okay.
So that is what is coming out of your device. So you'll find that when that's just a kind of a intrinsic quality of that device. So they can't sell you a PEMF device at 1,000 hertz because hertz is just the unit that measures it. So hertz is just the number of pulses per second. So if it is 1 hertz, that's only 1 pulse per second, and it's evenly spaced in that 1 second range.
Okay.
Now, if it's 30 hertz, that's 30 pulses evenly spaced in that range of 1 second. So, but you're still on that 1 second period, which is why it's still measured in hertz.
So 30 pulses in 1 second is 30 hertz.
Correct.
Okay. So then what changes? You're talking about frequency, correct?
Right.
So define what we mean by frequency.
So when our frequency changes, I have another little graph. So this will be also linked as well. So in our red graph, we see this is sine x, just the graph of sine x. So this is just, it uses the unit circle and pi, so you'll see it crosses here at pi, it crosses here at 2 pi. And that is just like if the trigonometric function that is just our like
Lord,
standard.
I should have mentioned earlier, Dagney's got a degree in biomedical engineering from the University of Georgia. So, yeah, this is, okay. So let's break this down to where like a veterinarian can understand this. It looks like the higher the frequency,
the bigger the number before x.
Okay.
So when you're looking at sine x, that is a frequency of 1. So we have one of these sine forms.
Okay.
In this, we're going to call this 6.2, that is like 2 pi. That is a 1 second period. So if these are all 1 second periods and they come down, we've got one waveform in the red graph.
Okay.
Now, in the blue graph, sine 2x, we've doubled that frequency. But if you look at our blue graph, it still goes to the same amplitude of wave, so the height of the wave is the same, but you just have 2 of that waveform in that 1 second period instead of 1 of the waveform.
All right, and that's, so as the frequency increases, the more waves I have in 1 second.
Correct.
All right.
Now, what's very interesting about it is, see how much smaller the little sections under the blue line are? So because of just the way that the trigonometric function is designed, the area under the curve of the red wave, that one hill, is the exact same as the area under these two combined. So this is 2 units under this red curve, and it's 1 unit under the blue curve the first time and 1 unit under the blue curve the second time. So if you add this one, between the origin and the blue curves together, you get the exact same amount of space as under the red curve. And why that's so important is because that is your total amount of electromagnetic power that's delivered to the horse.
So let me make sure I got this right. So if I'm in the ocean, I can have one really big wave, or I can have 2 small waves.
Right.
Same amount of water strikes me.
Precisely.
One of them's just a really big wave, and the other one's 2 smaller waves.
Exactly.
Okay, all right, that makes sense.
So then we
But
double.
the waves are delivering the same amount of energy.
water,
So I can
precisely.
have one wave really knock me down, or I can have 2 waves that don't knock me down, but they move the same amount of water.
Exactly.
Makes sense,
So
okay.
then we can double that frequency again and go down to our green graph, which is sine of 4x, and under each of those 4 green waves is the same exact amount of space, same amount of water, but it's split up into 4 waves rather than 1 or 2 waves like in the red and blue.
Okay, so the higher the frequency, same amount of energy,
Exactly.
just sending more waves.
Exactly, and they're evenly spaced.
Okay.
So that's why when everyone says like the Sport Innovations MagPro blanket, they like allow you to change the frequency while you're in the middle of the program. Well, changing the frequency doesn't necessarily do anything to change the amount of energy delivered to your horse because it's still measured in hertz. So it's still on that per 1 second spectrum. So you're changing the number of waves, but as you change like more or less waves per second, you're also, since you're changing that like time, space, it's delivering that same amount of energy. It's the intensity that's
Right, so depending on the machine and how it's set, what you're saying is we're going to deliver the same amount of energy. It's just whether we do it in one big pulse or we do it in a bunch of little ones.
right.
So another way to think about it is if I want to drive a nail in, I can hit it with a big hammer once, or I can hit it with my little hammer 10 or 12 times.
Precisely.
Perfect, okay. So I guess at the end of the day, we've nerded out on this. Why does it matter?
So I like to think of it like a hose. So
All right.
your frequency is if you have like one of the squirters that does 6 different functions on like the hose and you pull the trigger. So your frequency is the amount of times that you're starting and stopping the hose. And those are going to be evenly spaced. So there's just this exact same amount of off time as on time.
Okay.
So if, say, I want to do 1 pulse in a 60-second period, I'm holding for 30 seconds, but then I'm completely off for 30 seconds.
Okay.
So that is what changes your frequency, is that trigger on the hose nozzle.
So we're going to move energy for a certain amount of time, and
Exactly.
that's really the name of the game with pulse and electromagnetic Therapy is the amount of energy you're delivering to the tissues to create a tissue response.
So what that amount of energy is, that is where your intensity comes into play. And that is what your representative for whatever device you're buying is going to call your Gauss or your electromagnetic flux density. And it's measured in Gauss or milli or microtesla is the unit for that. So intensity is the height of our wave. And that just is the average number of the most electromagnetic, like the tippy top of that wave, how much electromagnetic density is getting delivered at that moment. So your intensity is like one of your 6 settings. So you have jet setting, you have center, you have full, you have shower, you have mist. So your intensity is choosing between jet and mist. So that's where your different models of PEMF device come into play. So you've got your BEMERs, which all of their conversation is about how nicely low their intensity is for daily use, like twice a day use, etc. So that is more of a mist option. So if you're using mist to spray somebody for 10 minutes versus you're using jet to spray somebody for 10 minutes, they're probably over that amount of time gonna get the same amount of wet. If it's 10 full minutes, but if you're doing it for 1 minute, somebody's going to get way more wet getting sprayed with the jet setting on the hose than they will for 1 minute of mist spray on a hose.
So we're delivering the same amount of water. It's just how intense you administer the water. Okay. Because really what we're trying to do is drive physiological factors. Correct? We're trying to increase nitric oxide. Does it have an effect on, in my world, growth factors are a big thing. Tissue growth factors, insulin-like growth factors. Is it driving those same things from the vascular endothelium, or? It
is. So all of my research work actually in the lab for my biomedical engineering degree has been in nitric oxide production, both naturally and synthetically. So nitric oxide is definitely stimulated. So essentially on the basic bare bones level, that PEMF wave as it enters the tissue is going to stimulate cells by, it takes, the ionic channels, all of your ionic gated channels from your billion physiology classes you took as a vet student, and it kind of supercharges those channels. So that just increases the efficiency of the cells. So the same thing that giving your horse electrolytes is doing. It's increasing the efficiency that cell receives things. So it's receiving oxygen more efficiently, it's receiving nutrients more efficiently, but also it's increasing the efficiency of the way that cell gets rid of waste products like lactic acid and CO2.
That makes sense. So it basically supercharges our cells, allows them to be more metabolically active.
So based on the cell type, you're looking at different functions. So that's why it's not recommended to use PEMF directly on, say, a tumor, because you're increasing, if you already have overactive cells like cancer cells, you're helping them increase their function as well. So that's why you don't want to use it directly on a tumor. But if you're looking at, for muscle relaxation, using PEMF like on muscle cells is great. It helps them release lactic acid much sooner, helps that lactic acid cycle prevent so much soreness and buildup in that muscle. And same thing for on the micro level, it increases your circulation because your microcirculation in your little teeny tiny vessels, not just your veins and arteries, but also, venules and arterioles, those are getting bigger and bigger and bigger because of the nitric oxide release to help more blood flow through the body, to help the red blood cells flow more efficiently, not even just quicker as in more volume, but it even helps them from sticking together, and that helps them travel more efficiently through the bloodstream.
That makes sense because, one of the things that we talk about when we're trying to get injuries to heal, and just in general, circulation's everything, right? We got to bring stuff in and get rid of bad things. And nitric oxide is very important for that. And so it makes sense. So we're going to use these pulse electromagnetic waves. We're going to increase circulation to the area. We're going to get those nitric oxide releases. We're going to help with some of that growth factor stimulation. That's something that we focus on a lot in the lameness world. Is, a lot of y'all have heard about platelet-rich plasma, Renovo, Shockwave, these different regenerative techniques, and it's really all focused on increasing circulation, bringing in some growth factors. Growth factors are important to stimulate these cells to heal. So it makes sense. We're going to do the same. Basically, we're doing the same thing, but we're going to use electromagnetic frequency to do that.
Right.
Am I all right?
Exactly.
So we've talked about, hertz. We've talked about frequencies. We've talked about what these therapies do. My question to you is, if you're using a jet or if you're using a shower, what role does that play in the body, and why is that important?
Right. So when you start off with like the lowest intensity devices like BEMER, those are very good for anti-inflammatory properties. So increasing the efficiency of your cell on a cellular level, and you're increasing the efficiency of the cells and their life cycle, but you're also, in doing that, you're increasing the efficiency of those tissues, and then the organ systems, and then the entire body. So that's for the very low intensity devices. What you're going for, there aren't analgesic effects the way that there are with Shockwave.
Okay.
The very low intensity PEMF has not shown those in any of the literature.
And BEMER is going to be in that category of a low intensity
exactly.
PEMF.
So great for anti-inflammatory, but no calculable analgesic effects as far as it doesn't have any pain canceling effects, no pain killing. Now, when you have the higher intensity devices like a MagnaWave, those have shown analgesic effects, pain killing effects, not just from inflammation, because they are such high intensity. And when I say higher intensity, I mean a BEMER is from, I believe it's like from 10 microtesla to 100 microtesla, whereas MagnaWave, you're looking at the lowest intensity it can possibly go to is like, I want to say 5,000 microtesla is the lowest it can go to, and it can go all the way up to 500,000 microtesla.
So we're talking 100 to 1,000-fold increase.
Right, lots
going
of zeros
from
added.
A BEMER to a MagnaWave.
Right.
So I could see that. That makes a lot of sense to me, because, and especially when we're talking about from the anti-inflammatory effects. It makes sense, like with the BEMER being anti-inflammatory, we really bump those Teslas up, we get some of those pain relieving properties. But I think there's more to it than just that. Like, at what point do we start? Is there a risk of cell damage? Is there a risk of overdoing it with some of these higher electromagnetic frequencies?
Personally, so there have been studies that have shown that everyone has a different sensitivity level. Every horse is different. Some very sensitive horses. My horse is very sensitive, and he can't even go to the higher levels of the BEMER, which is amazingly lower. I can't even imagine putting a MagnaWave on him. But there are some horses that if they have chronic pain and they need that help on a higher level, as far as targeted, taking the little loops that come on a MagnaWave, the little round things, and like adding them to a joint that has particularly terrible OA and having that pain release, then that's great for them. But as far as applying that much intensity to the entire body, the way that a BEMER blanket would, that is just an overwhelming amount of energy for most horses. So I think you'll find that the horse itself has a big impact on that. And the way I like to talk about that is, if I spray you down and you're in your bathing suit, you're going to be dry in like half an hour of sitting outside of the pool. But if I spray you down and you're in jeans and a sweatshirt and your hoodies gets all soaked through and your jeans get all soaked through, you're going to be wet for several hours.
Okay.
So I think some horses are just already in their bathing suit, or they're in a raincoat and that water bounces off of them more easily, versus some horses are sitting over there in their sweatshirt and their jeans, and they're just going to hold on to that energy for longer, and it's going to take them longer to dry out and have that energy come off of them.
Okay. Yeah, that kind of makes sense because I've watched some horses that are undergoing these therapies, and some can tolerate it and some can't.
Right.
And interesting enough, I tried the human BEMER on myself. I can't explain why, but it gave me a claustrophobic effect. It did not. It didn't work well. But I've got a lot of customers that use the BEMER on themselves, and they have had just fantastic results.
And I'm definitely one of those people. I'm a daily BEMER user personally.
Right.
I had that car crash where I had a
Correct.
lot of broken bones, a lot of ortho issues, and it has just been a life changer for me over the last, I've been using it for 7 years now. But I mean, probably 7 years ago when PEMF was jumping and everyone was getting a MagnaWave to do as a side business, I was MagnaWaved, and I think the logic was person with more injuries bump that intensity up, go higher,
Right.
because that will help them more. And I got zapped, and I mean, I couldn't stand up for about 3 days. It was a week before I was walking normally again, and we had an upper level horse at the barn I was at have that same experience. All the other people felt a nice difference. They really enjoyed it. All the other horses seemed to really enjoy it and had releases the way that they would after an acupuncture session or a massage session. But me and that one horse who had kind of more wear and tear on our bodies than the other people who had the PEMF that day, we both really struggled for several days. So once again, some things I think they've tightened up for a reason. They are protecting you as far as not everything needs to be all loosened up, loosey-goosey,
Correct.
because some things are, helping stabilize.
Well, it's interesting you bring up the anti-inflammatory effects, and one of the things that we've seen with sports medicine and different injuries, we talk about wanting to remove as much inflammation as possible, but I think we forget inflammation is not just about pain. It's not just bad. A mild inflammatory effect is what continues to drive those growth factors. And one of the things that I've seen is with some of the higher intensity PMF devices, I have had injuries that, like, I would get frustrated because this is not healing the way it should. And so I'm getting frustrated, and you start digging, and all of a sudden, like, oh yeah, we've got a PMF. Okay, well, how often are you doing this? Oh, we're doing it every day. And so they're doing this every single day. And it may be great and because it does have these anti-inflammatory issues, or this anti-inflammatory property, we're losing that inflammatory process that helps these injuries heal. I guess what I would equate it to is, too much of a good thing.
Exactly. Well, and a lot also with that higher intensity, like the MagnaWave stuff, you do have a lot of pain relief. So maybe that pushes that horse to maybe go a little harder on that leg than is ideal because they're feeling better. So they're using more weight, they're not compensating as much, and then that does make it take longer for that recovery to happen because they're using that leg way more than they should be because they're comfortable and they're feeling good, which is great as far as you don't want your horse to be sitting there in pain in that moment. But, sometimes a little bit of that mental pain is good psychologically to kind of keep us off of the part of us that's trying to heal.
Does make sense. So what are the so we've got different products. We talked about BEMER, we've talked about the MagnaWave. What other PMF-like products are out there? And I would really love thoughts. We're not here to promote anything.
Yeah, we're not affiliated with any of these companies.
But I see a lot of them. And I know in the veterinary literature we've got very little research. That's what's exciting to have someone like you on that truly understands that's done the deep dives, and we can really get into this information. And so we talk about we talk about BEMER, we talk about MagnaWave. What else is out there? And I'd love to kind of understand your thoughts on where they fall as far as the jet, the spray nozzle. Where are they at? How often should we be using things like that?
So very, very highest end of intensity is the MagnaWave line of products. So
Okay.
there are the huge ones that you see people rolling around on wheels, and those go up, I think it's something crazy. It's like they go up to 380,000 microtesla, and they don't go very low at all. I think they go, I don't remember what the exact number on the low end is, but they don't go very low at all. And then you'll have the smaller handheld MagnaWave products, which are a lot lower intensity. They only go up to about 35,000 microtesla instead of 380,000 microtesla. But I mean, that's still a lot of energy when compared to the other products. So that the size, as far as ability to hold it, does correlate a lot to the power of the MagnaWave machines.
So at what point do we want to reach for that I'm going to call the first one you talk about, I'm going to call it the sledgehammer. I'm going to call it the jackhammer.
Okay.
And then we'll call the other one the sledgehammer. At what point do we want to reach for that type of therapy?
I think if you've got a horse that has such crippling OA or ring bone or side bone, something that the pain is not controlled probably by any sort of NSAID, it's probably you're on that place where you're trying to decide, am I able to keep this horse comfortable? I think that's a great time to go for that sledgehammer.
So you're saying grab that when you're looking for pure analgesic effect?
Yes.
Pure analgesic.
From the literature, yes.
Grab the big dog.
Exactly.
Analgesia is what we're focused on. We're controlling pain.
Yep, exactly.
From a physiological level, are we really helping anything with it, or?
I mean, yes. So there are a lot of studies. Most of the studies are ortho studies, because if you look at the way that these PEMF devices have been used in humans, you're looking at a lot of sports medicine. You're looking at a lot of athletes. Mm-hmm. So fracture, like a reduced fracture, healing, like a disunion fracture, you're having, like, there are amazing physiological effects that way. But as far as
so stimulating some osteoblasts, those are the cells that help build bone back together.
Right.
It is helping to drive some of those and increase bone density is what we're seeing in fractures.
So with huge trauma fractures, I mean, they've had unbelievable results with those higher intensities.
All right. So next arrow in your quiver. All right. So we've started out. We've had the sledgehammer we've had the jackhammer to the sledgehammer analogy on the MagnaWave line of products. Who's kind of next in that intensity?
Under that are Pulse Equine, P3, and Sport Innovations. So that's the MagPro. That's the red blanket. That's pretty much the only other wearable option. Right. So it's similar to a BEMER blanket in its design, where you can just attach it and set it on and walk away, the way that it's so nice to be able to do that with the BEMER while you're getting horses ready. So those three are kind of in that mid-range, where they, even at their lowest spectrum, they don't go into as low of intensity as the BEMER does for daily use. But I do, and there have been slight analgesic effects shown for those three products that are in that kind of mid-range, but it really depends on how you use it, how often you're using it. I think those are good options, as far as they often have they're higher intensity than the BEMER would be, but not to the point where you can only use it once every week or once every 2 weeks. The MagnaWave, even a MagnaWave practitioner coming to your house is going to recommend that you don't use that MagnaWave more than once a week. And sometimes horses don't even need it other than once every 2 weeks. But if you want to use it 3 or 4 days a week, those mid-range P3, Pulse Equine, MagPro by the Sport Innovations line, those are really good devices for that. And then if you're looking for daily use or twice daily use, that's when you go, there's nothing like the BEMER as far as low intensity. That's the only option for that low of an intensity for that daily use.
So mid-range, why am I going to go grab the mid-range? They got some analgesic effects. We're still getting the stimulation that we've talked about with all, because all of them are stimulating nitric oxide. They're all helping promote those growth factors.
Exactly.
So we're going to call this, we got a framing hammer out there, just your regular hammer.
Right.
What's the benefit of grabbing something in that mid-range?
So something in that mid-range, a lot of times they are more adjustable, so they can go higher, they can go lower. So if you've got a lot of performance horses at your barn, or if you've got kind of the lazier, slower horses, those do much better with the higher levels. So your more sensitive types are not going to do as well with not being able to get as low an intensity. So my personal horse, I don't think I could ever use any of those products other than a BEMER on him, because he even has a hard time at the higher BEMER settings. So with that, I'd be very hesitant to venture into that mid-range for him. But if you're a pro and you've got 10 horses in training at any given moment, and they're all, maybe you've got a couple young horses who are a little hotter, but mostly you're just keeping experienced high performance horses comfortable and in work, that mid-range is going to be great for those horses that are just kind of run-of-the-mill, steady eddy horses, maybe even the ones that tend to be a bit lazier, and this will gear them up a bit, because what's also interesting is you look at cognitive studies for humans, and you look at the higher intensities having a huge impact on cognitive vigilance and on attention to detail and function in cognitive tests and being able to like finish cognitive tests faster with higher intensity PEMF. Whereas you look at all of the studies for things like melatonin release and mental relaxation, physical relaxation, testing those things in humans at the much lower intensities, and those always shine much better at the lower intensities.
That's interesting. I was not aware of the cognitive studies in people.
Yeah. So, and that's one of the things that I love to be able to compare to, because I mean, you can say a lot of things anytime a human's involved, whether that's that human's horse or that human themselves, you can always kind of say, is this placebo effect? Like, it's hard to say. If it works, it works. So, not to negate any of that, but you can always kind of claim that. Whereas I love looking at studies that are, petri dish grown bits of tissue. Like, oh, this is a muscle that was grown in a petri dish. This is tendon that was grown in a petri dish, and you get to see how those tissues react to the PEMF in the petri dish. Kind of hard to have placebo effect on a 1 inch by 1 inch cube of tissue. True. You can't really do it.
Well, it is interesting because I'll have people come to the clinic and they say, we tried PEMF and he was just jumping out of his skin. And what I've noticed is usually my higher strung horses that have a hard time tolerating that. So mid-range blankets, got a place. All right. So then what's the next one? So
the lowest you're going to go is that BEMER blanket. And that's just going to be the very lowest of the low intensities that you can possibly get from any PEMF generating machine. There's nothing like it. There's nothing that goes as low as it will go, probably by about 1.0. So the lowest function on that Sport Innovations MagPro is the highest on the BEMER times 10. So you've got that jump, quite a large jump.
A tenfold increase.
Exactly, between that BEMER and that next kind of
And we go back to what we talked about earlier. We're still transmitting the same amount of energy.
Right.
It's just how we're doing it.
And that's not a complete catch-all, because that is where it comes in, the length of the program as far as that goes. So it's not necessarily the same amount of energy if you do it for 20 minutes versus if you do it for an hour and a half. At that point, when you're talking about a different time period.
Well, I'm in the same time period. If we run all these products for 30 minutes, we're still
frequency, So if the frequency changes, it's still the same amount of energy. It's the intensity. If the intensity is much higher versus lower, you're transmitting less energy with a lower intensity, more energy with a higher intensity.
Makes sense. So when we get into BEMER blankets, or just BEMER in general, lower intensity.
Much.
Would you say the horses tolerate them better than others, or what's the benefit? Why do I want to grab this lower intensity unit?
I would definitely say for the higher strung horses, so a lot of people, if you're going to have a BEMER, you get other body work done, and your body worker will be able to tell you, hey, if your horse is the kind of horse that needs electro every time it gets acupuncture every week, then you're going to probably want one of the mid-range to higher intensity devices. If your acupuncturist is saying oh yeah, we do our electro maybe 1 out of every 4 times, because other than that, the horse just spazzes out, you're going to want to go for the lowest, that BEMER device instead. So that kind of sensitivity your chiropractor can tell you about it, a massage therapist can tell you about it. If a horse is crawling out of its skin with just the needle and acupuncture, and let alone any electro, it's going to be a more sensitive horse, and you're going to want to put that lower intensity device on it. So those things that are coming from any additional body workers that you have, also just grooming the horse. If you have a horse that goes like this every time you curry comb, that's probably a more sensitive horse. So you're looking at a lot of those thoroughbreds that don't even like to be brushed because it's too much for them sensory wise. You're probably wanting to not put them on higher levels of PEMF either.
That makes sense. So really knowing your horse is going to be critical, because I have seen that when Dr. Zoe here, she's an acupuncturist, And I've watched her acupuncture horses over the years. Your acupuncturist, Dr. Green, I've watched her do the same. And, some of these horses do really great with the needles. And like, okay, let's add a little electro. And they barely turn the electro on this machine, and this horse is not having it. Does great with the regular. I've actually had some acupuncture myself. And interesting you say that, because regular acupuncture I was great with. She turned the little electrical thing on, not okay with
Did
this.
you levitate? I levitate.
I about levitated. So
Yeah.
it makes sense why even the BEMER, and now I'm really wondering, like, did it have the wrong setting? Because that's really what led you down this road is you have a BEMER, you've got a horse, and you're like, wait a minute, this isn't working like I thought. You do into a deep dive. You find out that the type of horse you have, you should never see a 3, correct?
Exactly.
You're like a 2 or less kind of person,
Yeah, 2
right?
is like if he's been ridden 5 days in a row and I know he's going to be exhausted. Other than that, he is a program 1 kind of guy. And I know that I can't even get close to the BEMER program 1 on any other device. So that kind of really does pin you in the corner with that BEMER device, because that's the only thing that he can even tolerate.
It makes a lot of sense, because I did notice a big difference in your personal horse. You drop him down to a 1, and I noticed like he was a different horse when you changed the BEMER setting. So this was not even just this wasn't a one-time thing. Like we brought him to 1, and it kind of changed how I responded. And that makes sense, because if you're talking about the release of all these neurotransmitters, and you're talking about the release of these nitric oxide, these things are not innocuous. I mean, you are changing the physiology of the body. These are not going to be they're not immediately going to go away. So I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me.
Well, and especially with a horse like my horse, I mean, I've not had him a short amount of time. I've had him 8 years, got him when he was 4 years old, and the transformation I've seen over the last 3 months since I started doing all this research and changed the way that I more mindfully BEMER him. I BEMER more places on him. I've started I really have seen a huge difference now that I've started doing his sternum, which is not a place that you normally think to BEMER a horse. It's not in any of the BEMER pictures, but you can take those little leg cuffs and put them in the surcingle of the blanket, and I see a huge difference in how he reaches his shoulders through his flying lead changes compared to when he hasn't had his sternum BEMER'd. And mentally I've seen massive changes. I mean, this used to be a horse that, bless him, he was spinning at least once a ride, if not more than that. And then I now have, I'll go 3 weeks of riding 4 days a week and not have a spin, because I just am more cognizant about that amount of energy that I'm zapping him with right before I get on every ride.
And that makes a lot of sense too when you're talking about BEMER in different places and talking to your body worker, because I get a lot of these questions as a vet, and I do mostly sports med. I keep these athletes going, but one of the things that's very important to me when I'm doing the vet work is like, all right, what team do I have? And that team is a farrier. That team usually involves somebody doing chiro and acupuncture. That team, oftentimes there's even a masseuse or a body worker that's involved in this as well, and getting that feedback is very important. And it sounds like here, I think, understanding that, like, where are these muscles tight? Where can we loosen things up? Because, what I usually hear is, hey, I put the BEMER blanket on, my warm-up's much shorter before I ride. Yeah. Like, he's coming through his back a lot sooner. Life's just better. But we forget about some of these other muscle groups. And that makes a lot of sense. It's not just for the back.
Right. Well, and that's the thing is, like, if you think about the thoracic sling, how many times do you hear your body workers talk about a thoracic sling, and you're kind of like, I'm not really sure what that is really. But it's this huge network of muscles that's connecting the front legs to the body. Right,
because in horses, there's no bony attachment on the front legs. It's just this thoracic sling. It's a group of muscles that hold everything together. And you're talking about holding up a substantial amount of this horse.
Right, and you want those muscles to be strong, because you want, especially if it's a very big-headed horse, like my horse's freakishly large head, there's a lot to hold up there. So, there's a lot of those attachments that you want to be strong, but you want them to be loose and pliable in the same way. Your farrier will appreciate it much more if they can actually adduct your horse's front leg while they're shoeing it. I can tell you, I haven't been a farrier now and shoeing horses for close to 25 years. When a horse can actually adduct that leg and move it away from their body, I always say I'm short, stocky, and don't bend, and so I can't work on horses that are short, stocky, and don't bend, because one of us has got to bend. Right. Somebody got to bend here. Exactly.
So That makes a lot of sense. Well, Dagney, I know you've got this company, Centaur Strategies. It sounds to me it's been a great path for you to go down. I know we kind of nerded a lot here at the beginning, but if you're going to throw out a takeaway, all right, so we've talked about hertz and frequencies. Name of the game is transfer of energy. Transfer of energy is going to lead to the release of these neurotransmitters. It's going to lead to activated substances that help either muscle relax, help tissues to heal. But at the end of the day, what do you want people to take away? What do you want people to understand about PEMF therapy? What do we really need to know? And how do we pick a device? I guess that's where I'm getting is like, what's important here? How do we pick a device? How do we go through this?
Yeah, so I think that the main takeaway is the orders of magnitude different in intensity of these devices.
Right.
So just keeping aware that, like, you while you're washing a water trough, you may not want to use mist. So if your horse has, crazy ring bone and crazy side bone and weird OA and all sorts of joints that you wish it didn't have OA in, or kissing spines, or any of these like much larger but chronic issues, you're going to want to go for that jet setting. Whereas,
right.
If you're washing your horse's face off after a ride, you don't want to spray them in the face with a jet. That's definitely more of a mist, maybe up to shower job.
Right.
So I think that really sitting down, really thinking about, especially if you're an amateur with one horse, this is way easier to do because you kind of know your horse, you know your exact needs. But if you're a professional that has lots of horses coming through and you're like, oh, I'm an eventer, most of the things that come through here are very sensitive off the track thoroughbreds. That's when you kind of want to prioritize getting that lower intensity device like the BEMER. Whereas if you are somebody who has, maybe you have heavily muscled dressage horses that can tend to be on the lazier side with their heavy muscle and with, toting trying to have that energy that you need while you have that mass. Because the mass on dressage horses and like the bigger hunter
yes.
horses is so different from a jumper or a event horse.
Correct.
So if you have those horses that are carrying like vast amounts of weight that might make them a little more behind the leg, those are the ones where you're going to want that more mid-range device. And then the ones that have kind of chronic troubles, that's where you're going for like the higher range, which is also nice because those have a lot of traveling body workers. So you'll have a lot of people with MagnaWaves that travel to come to your barn once every week or once every 2 weeks, so you don't have to have your own device for those kind of chronically troubled horses.
That makes sense, because if you only need something once a week or once every 2 weeks, you're going to be way better off outsourcing that versus something that you're going to be using on a daily basis.
Exactly. So I think the big advice is stop. Think about what you need. There is no magic to any of it. So like the one thing that I did want to talk about is the patented BEMER signal, the magical patented BEMER signal that they make it sound like it's like an injection into your horse of magicness. And really all it means is that the height of your wave is changing and the spacing of your waves is changing in that waveform, but there's still what is called a periodic waveform. So it's still the same pattern over and over again. It's just not that even wave. It's some of the waves are higher, some of the waves are lower, some of the waves are closer together, some of the waves are further apart. But as far as that intensity that it's telling you on the user manual, that's an averaged number. So there's nothing about that patented BEMER signal that is magical, but I can see how with any stimulus, if I sit here and go beep, beep, beep at the exact same volume, the exact same rate for half an hour, you're gonna tune me out. Whereas if my beeps get closer together and further apart and my beeps get freakishly loud and then freakishly quiet, you're gonna stay a little more attuned to that because the stimulus is changing. So that is where that BEMER wave, they don't need to deliver as much energy and you can use those lower intensities because they're having everything change just a little bit every single time, and it's keeping your cells more attuned to, oh, this is a stimulus, oh, this is a stimulus, rather than tuning it out the way that the other periodic waveforms that are more consistent can be tuned out.
That's interesting, because I'm glad you brought that up, because we hear about that. But like I said, I've never really known what that means. But I could see from a physiologic response, like that change in intensity, and that change in signal could definitely have an effect.
Yeah. So, and that's one of those things that does it have a remarkable effect? We don't really know because we haven't had comparative studies that have these specific brands involved. Because
Right.
a lot of that is patented, a lot of it is proprietary information. So we can't do side-by-side comparisons of those things as well as far as published literature. Now, if you have multiple devices and you want to do a little study on your horse, feel free to send it to me because I think that would be super interesting. But personally, I'm kind of capped out financially at my one BEMER. So I don't know that I will be investing in also having a MagnaWave. So, it's harder to say how much difference that's making. But logically, it does make sense to me that you'd get more bang for your buck per micro Tesla if there was a change in that stimulus rather than the same thing over and over and over.
Sense. Because that's a big thing in veterinary medicine right now is all these different machines are hitting the market. Is what does what's good, what's bad, when do we use what? And unfortunately, that's not uncommon is things hit the market and we're having to learn as we go.
Right.
So Dagney, if somebody's looking to have questions answered, because like I said, I get a lot of questions, and that's why we brought you on the show today, is I get a lot of questions about these different PEMF therapies. And I'll be honest, I have not taken the time to really do the deep dive, and I doubt many veterinarians have. I think we find a product, somebody finds a product and like, oh, I'm going to go with that. But, that's one of the things your company focuses on is help people navigate this field of PEMF therapy. So if somebody's got questions, how can they find you?
Yeah, so I have a Facebook page, Centaur Strategies, and I post fun facts and nerd to English translations for a lot of the terminology that's used in PEMF therapy. And you can feel free to contact me by messaging that page. That'd
be great, because I can tell you it's been a big help. I've sent a lot of people your way, because like I said, I get asked these questions. And even today, I feel like I've got better knowledge, but I still think it takes a lot more information to decide what unit's best for you.
Absolutely.
Where you need to be.
And it's my favorite thing to chat about. So I'm happy to talk to anybody who wants to talk about it.
So, well, I'll tell you what, Dagney, thanks for being on today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Guys, if y'all have got any questions, please feel free to reach out to her. Like I said, I've sent a lot of people her way, and it has really helped. And it's something that's I think we need more information. Hopefully we can continue to get more research. So everybody, thanks for tuning in. If y'all have got more questions or if there's anything you want to hear about, please drop us a line. Please DM us is the new word I've learned. You want to DM us. Leave a comment in the comment section. If you're watching us on YouTube, please like and subscribe. Put a comment in. Keep sending in ideas for podcasts. We've got some more coming. Like I said, our whole goal is to help break these things down and get people to understand. So look forward to seeing y'all soon. Take care. Thanks. 2 trailer park girls go around the outside, around the outside, around the outside.